Hello, everyone, and welcome back into Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner and picked a good time to start recording this afternoon, or well, it's this evening now. We're starting this stream at 7:45. Here we go. The Minnesota Twins, your Minnesota Twins, my Minnesota Twins, have won 7 games in a row and have slingshot themselves not just to a winning record, but back into the thick AL Central mix. We're going to get to the standings in just a second, but if you go back to a week ago at this time, the Twins dropped 2 of 3 to the Detroit Tigers, and it felt like their season was in a free-for-all. Also, earlier in that week, they got swept by the Baltimore Orioles. They went 1-5 last week. Now in the last 7 days, 6 days, in the last 7 games, probably the better way to word that, the Minnesota Twins have went 7-0 and slingshot themselves back in to all of the AL Central shenanigans that are about to go on. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But by the way, if you look at the, this was coming into today's game, which the Twins won and the Guardians lost. The Twins, thanks to their winning streak, not only slingshot themselves in the standings, technically they're still in 4th place, but Fangraphs gives the Twins about a 55% chance to win the American League Central, the highest of any team in the division. That's despite Cleveland, despite the fact that the Guardians have the best record in the American League. The Twins still are favored, according to Fangraphs projections, to win the American League Central. That's all the hope I need. That's why we're here. That's why we're going. It's Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. Let's do the dang thing. And I mean, obviously morale was low. The team couldn't hit. They had a batting average of like 205. It was bad. Most of the players couldn't hit their weight. It was, as a team, it was not good. Not great at all. But you just felt like, you know, if there was any week for the Twins to turn themselves around, it was going to be right now. It was going to be what was happening this week with their schedule. When you looked at who the Twins were playing, they had 4 games against the worst team, not just in baseball, but one of the worst starts a team has had in baseball history, the Chicago White Sox. They were 3-19 or 3-18, whatever it was, coming into that game on Monday at Target Field. The Twins came out right away, and thanks to Max Kepler coming off the IL, having 3 RBIs, the Twins won 7-1 or whatever the score ended up being, cruised to a victory. You get a walk-off win on Tuesday. You cruise to victory on Wednesday night. You win a day game on a getaway. You go to the West Coast, and your offense puts the beat down on a really, really bad Angels team. That's bad. They're young. They got some things to work out in the post-Ohtani era, but the Angels, shocker, have just not been a good baseball team. They haven't made the playoffs in a decade. Somebody save Mike Trout, for the love of all that is good and holy. Get Mike Trout out of there. But anyway, the Twins get 7 wins in a row. And that's when you looked at the schedule, right? I mean, I wrote something on Zone Coverage of this effect of like, Twins are pretty unlucky with their injuries, but like, it's got to turn around at some point, right? Like, things have to turn around a little bit. And a 7-game winning streak is a little bit of luck to it. There's always that famous monologue in Moneyball where Bob Costas is talking about the A's 20-game winning streak. And he's like, obviously you have to be good. Like, that goes into it. But like, there is an element of randomness to winning a lot of games in a row. It's why when this stretch began, it's like, can the Twins go 4 games with the White Sox, 3 games with the Angels, that's 7, and a 10-game stretch with another 3-game series against the White Sox coming up? Could you go, you know, in the 10-game stretch, can you go, say you drop 3 games, can you go 7-3 over that stretch? Well, the Twins have already got 7 wins. If the Twins could win 4-2 over this 6-game stretch, you know, they would get back to 500, well, or get close to the 500 mark, or whatever that number ended up being. Twins, not only that, they are won 7 games before that White Sox series even began. They're just in such a good spot right now. And for those of you joining on the chat, feel free to drop in a comment. Feel free to drop in how things are going for you guys. How are you feeling about the Twins? Because I think the vibes are pretty good right now. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, drop them down in there. But really, overall, I think with where the Twins are at going into this, there was just this prime opportunity to seize momentum and to play a bad White Sox team. And not that they needed to win 7 games. They didn't need to win 7 in a row, but they did. And that's the thing. It's really hard in baseball to win 7 games in a row. So obviously the Twins have played well in these 7 games, but there is a randomness to it. Like the Twins could very well have lost that game with the White Sox where the Twins were losing going into the 9th inning. When Byron Buxton hit that 2-run home run. Or hit the solo home run, and then the Twins had a 2-run 9th inning with Kirilov's RBI single. So there's a little bit of randomness to it. There's a little bit of luck. There's a little bit of things kind of breaking your way. And the article I wrote was talking about how things they're going to have to break the Twins' way at some point, right? Because nothing has went the way of the Minnesota Twins in the first month of the season. And then this 7-game winning streak turns things around. You see that luck change. You get a 7-game winning streak that kind of makes up for a little bit of the foibles that you had in the early part of the season. And now here's where you sit. Here is where you can do some stuff. Here's where you have an opportunity to make your mark. And not that the Twins needed to win 7 games. They could have won 2 out of 3 against the Whites, or won 3 out of 4 against the White Sox and win 2 out of 3 against the Angels. So can you go 5-2 in that 7-game stretch? Well, they went 7-0, which means this series with the White Sox, while it is important and while they should win 2 out of the 3 games, you end a 10-game stretch 9-1. If you can win 2 out of 3 in Chicago, which, by the way, not as easy as we thought about. The Chicago White Sox just swept the Tampa Bay Rays at whatever it's called now. U.S. Cellular Field is what I always call it, because Mickey Park, whatever you want to go with. But the Minnesota Twins have a chance to get 2 out of 3 going to Chicago and end this 10-game stretch and really put themselves back into the thick of things. Then the schedule gets tough. You have the Mariners, who are pitching lights out with their rotation. You have the Yankees coming to town soon. They seem to be back. You have a couple teams that will be tough coming up in the month of May, but we talked about you can't win the division in April, but you can lose it. You could very much torpedo your season in April and even early part of May. Just like, if you want to use football terms, the Minnesota Vikings going 0-3 the last football season torpedoed their year. I know they eventually worked back to 4-4, and shenanigans happened. But the point is it would have been an uphill battle, and you dug yourself into a hole, and it would have been tough to see them come out of that. And it's the same thing with the Minnesota Twins. They put themselves in a hole. They stopped digging. They got 7 wins in a row, and now they've put themselves back in. And I think we need to acknowledge a couple things of why this team is being so successful. The first one I want to add for why this team is being so successful has to be, and they talked about this on the TV broadcast today, the rally sausage. Look at this thing. Look at this thing. The rally sausage. Apparently, somebody just brought along a big tube of summer sausage from a few games back. I think Dave Popkins, the Twins hitting coach, saved it or something like that. And guys have just been carrying it around and giving it to each other after big hits. Last year, the Twins had the Land of 10,000 Rakes fishing vest. Well, it's not quite there yet because Pablo Lopez says he's working on something, or he has some project in the works. But, man, we're already off to a good start here with the sausage. I don't know. You can insert your middle school puns in here. I don't blame you. The Twins have a rally sausage that is helping them win games. You can't make this stuff up. It's why baseball is fun. I think Kyle Farmer had something to say about it, and I'm trying to find the quote here, so just hang with me as I'm looking through this thing, because, man, it is it's a rally sausage. I mean, what more do you need if you're the Twins? More do you want? The rally sausage is taking on something. I think Kyle Farmer talked about how everybody's trying to get their hands on the sausage. I don't get it. It is what it is. Baseball players are baseball players, and it's just kind of how these things work out. But a rally sausage, that's really just the main point I wanted to take away in all this. And here we go. But yeah, the rally sausage has been helping the Twins, and it's been making the rounds today because you just see little clips on Twitter or like on the TV broadcast, like a guy hitting a home run, walking back to the dugout and having a log of salami thrown at him. And this is great. It's great. Not only that, the Twins have gotten some big production off of some of their bats. Ryan Jeffers has hit in the leadoff spot, never in his career coming into this week, and he's done it 3 times. And look, I can't say that it's because of the summer sausage, but I can't not say it's because of the summer sausage. I'm like Michael Scott. I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing, and I can't remember what day exactly the rally sausage made its debut into Twins lore, but I have a stat that I think is worth mentioning. So according to Fangraphs, they have what's called a run value, which is how a certain team hits against a certain pitch. It doesn't take batting average. It doesn't take this. It doesn't take that. Essentially what it does is it just takes the how many runs, what's your value over the pitch, just some kind of combined score to get a gauge on things. Because sometimes batting average OPS, it can sometimes matter how many times you see it. So if you don't see it a lot and you do well or bad, it can kind of skew it. So here is the Minnesota Twins lineup run value according to Fangraphs. And this is where I think the rally sausage helps things out for the Minnesota Twins. So from opening day to last Sunday, the Twins against the fastball were a negative 4.6, which was 20th in baseball. They also were 20th in baseball hitting the slider at negative 3.1. And against the curveball, they were negative 3.6, which was dead last in baseball. The Twins were one of the worst teams in baseball trying to hit the curveball, the slider, and not only that, they didn't see a ton of fastballs, and when they got them, they were not ready to take advantage of them. But this week, and I know they played the White Sox, I know they played the Angels, I know that we're obviously picking them at the high points, but it's a positive sign in the right direction because the Twins against the fastball this week, starting since Monday, are first with a 12.6 run value against the fastball. Against the slider, the Twins are 5.5 runs best against the slider. That's the best in baseball. And a 1.6 run value against the curveball, which is 7th best in baseball. So, it's not that the Twins are taking advantage of playing bad teams, but they won 7 in a row. And I think it's gotta be due in part to the rally sausage right there. Not that I thought that was like the most important thing in the world. Not that I thought that was the most important stat, but you know what? I think we got to give credit where credit is due to the rally sausage. And I want to give the rally sausage its flowers. So there you go. It reminds me of that. You guys remember Vine? You remember Vine? You remember they talk about the sausage, and it's just people talking about like breakfast, and just ends with everybody around them. Once they get to the word sausage, like they and then everybody around the table is sausage, and that's what it's like for the Minnesota Twins. So I can't wait until somebody finds that old Vine clip from a decade ago and puts that together. So I eagerly await that when it gets here. Besides that, the Minnesota Twins have just played well. I mean, when you look at, you've gotten not necessarily great starts from your starting staff. Chris Paddock didn't have it today or on Saturday night. Pablo Lopez didn't have it today, and he really didn't have it against the White Sox either. And the cold weather start for Pablo in that one against Chicago, where he gave up a 3-run home run to Robert. And if you look at Pablo's start today, he had a perfect first 4 innings, got the first 2 outs of the 5th, ran into trouble, gave up 4 runs, and only pitched 5 innings. But, I think what it all chalks up to is Pablo Lopez is a guy that does not start the seasons particularly well in a bulk. So like his opening day start was really good, but that opening day always tends to work well towards the pitchers. But when because hitters haven't gotten a ton of at-bats yet, they're real game, everything, whatever that goes into it. But Pablo Lopez did a lot of this last year, whereas April and May weren't impressive. They were bad by any stretch, but they're not ace caliber. And then once you get to June, July, August, September, then all of a sudden things ratchet up and he's got an ERA of like 3.5. And you're like, oh, okay. And if you take out the bad part of that season, it's like, okay, well, since from when he figured it out on, he's pitching at ace level like he did a year ago. That's what I'm banking on. I'm not worried about Pablo Lopez in the long term. And there were some people worried, myself included, about his velocity that was going down after his last start against Chicago, which typically means you're hurt. Not the case. The weather was yucky. It was gross that day. I mean, it's gross outside right now. It's been like 45 degrees and raining in Minnesota the last few days. And it's cold and rainy. And there's probably certain points during this podcast where you can hear rain coming off the tin roof of my house. Anyway, so that's where we sit with that one. The Twins have just played well. Their pitching with Pablo Lopez has been, again, not ideal, but the Twins have scored runs. And that's the other thing. And Bailey Ober had a nice start on Friday. And the Twins pitching has done well enough. Even Paddock didn't quite have the juice, but it didn't matter because he pitched one. He didn't get shelled. He pitched well enough to keep the team in the ballgame. But not only that, the Twins offense during this winning streak has gotten early runs. And that's what we've talked about so much, where with the Twins bullpen, they've been impressive, the best part of the team throughout this entire first part of the season. But you talk about the Twins and you go, yeah, their starter gave up 3 runs, but like 3 runs over 6 innings is a quality start. Twins offense only scored 2, or by the time they scored 3, it was like the 9th inning and the bullpen gave up a run and you lose 4-3. Like it was the story of the first half of 2023, which was your pitching is dominant, but it doesn't really matter when your offense only scores 3 runs, or when you do score 3 runs, your pitching staff just quite isn't on it today. And there's just so little room for error with your pitching staff that they always have to be perfect. And that wasn't the case. The Twins got early leads, and especially in this Angels series, whenever the Angels had an inning, the Twins immediately responded with multiple runs. And it hasn't just been one person. It's going up and down the lineup. There's a lot of things that the Minnesota Twins are doing right now that just looks really, really good. And I don't have any numbers pulled up right now, but Byron Buxton feels like he's kind of gotten his groove back. He had a slump a couple weeks ago. Feels like over the last week and a half that Byron Buxton is starting to heat up. Christian Vasquez went 3 for 4 today. He had a nice game. When you look at Jose Miranda, he's quietly heated up. I know he had an extra base hit today. Austin Martin, although his OPS isn't very high, he'll kind of come through and prove that at the very least that he doesn't deserve a demotion. He's not quite on a heater, but at the same time, he'll get enough hits to where you're like, okay, yeah, he can keep playing. He's justifying getting to stick around. He can steal some bases. He's gotten a couple RBIs. He's gotten some, he's done enough, I think, to justify sticking around. Willie Castro started to heat up. Max Kepler has been productive. Had a monster home run on Saturday night. I believe it was Saturday night into the right center field, over the right center field wall at Angel Stadium, which is no small feat. So for him to do that is impressive. Just going down the line, Alex Kirilloff had a 2-run double today. Ed Julian continues to be Ed Julian. Carlos Santana has life. That's been another thing about this stretch. We talked about a week ago at this time. It's like Carlos Santana's cooked. Like that guy's not going to be able to play anymore. This is going to be atrocious. And then all of a sudden, Carlos Santana, over his last 4 games, is at 3 home runs, including a big 3-run home run on Saturday night. And that's the thing when people talk about DFAing guys early in the season. And I was getting to that territory too. So I'm not trying to like scold people for thinking Carlos Santana was cooked, because I was thinking that too. But it's to say, when you have a veteran, and a veteran who's been around like Carlos Santana, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You cannot bail on their career, or you can't bail on their season after seeing the career that they have. And yeah, like you could say he's cooked, he's past his expiration date, and he might have been, but you have to give those veterans the benefit of the doubt. You can't bail on them after a month. I mean, even look at Kyle Farmer. Kyle Farmer's batting average was under 100 coming into this weekend, and he had an impressive Saturday and a game that he badly needed to get out of the funk he had. I think the rally sausage benefited him more than anything else over the last week. But I mean, when everybody hit well, it's what happens when you play the White Sox. It's what happens when you play the Angels. But Carlos Santana, I think it's just a case of you got to let veterans get their at-bats. And I know myself last year included was like, it was tiring seeing Joey Gallo strike out time after time after time after time after time. You get the gist. But like, you still need to give those veterans the benefit of the doubt because they're veterans. They've earned it. And also you're paying them a lot of money. So you need to put them out there. And when you do eventually DFA them, or like with Joey Gallo, you just stash them away on the injured list without cutting them, you can justify to yourselves, their agents, the ownership, yeah, I'm sorry, it's just not working out. We gave you a half a season. We gave you 3/4 of a season with Gallo. You can't turn around to Carlos Santana, who's a pro's pro, and say, sorry, you had a bad few weeks. Get out of here, when the whole team is doing bad. It wasn't like it was just Carlos Santana. It was the whole team. So I think that's where it's like baseball is a game of patience, and it stings. It sucks when your team isn't doing well, and you have to keep telling yourself to be patient through these stretches. And again, I'm telling this more for myself. I'm not trying to like scold anybody, because I'm needing to tell myself this as well. But Carlos Santana's figured it out, or at least has kind of gotten it back up to where Now that stat line doesn't quite look as egregious. Kyle Farmer's got a little bit more work to do. So does Willie Castro, but those guys also had a nice series. Everybody hit well. The weather, turns out when the weather's warmer, the ball tends to carry a little bit more. And for all the consternation, especially in the first couple weeks of the season about the Twins not hitting home runs, go look at Fangraphs right now. Go look at Baseball Reference. Go look at top home runs in baseball. Twins are 7th as a team in home runs. They're back to being a top 10 power team in baseball. Last year, they finished, top 3 in home runs? They're going to be, if you give them a few more weeks, and now they're going back to Chicago, so the weather is going to get a little worse, but it's going to start to warm up probably pretty quick, and then you're going to see the Twins start to sneak back in to that top 5 in home runs as a team. But when you look at this, when you look at the Twins offense, their OPS is starting to go back up. The home runs are starting to go back up, and obviously playing bad teams will help that. But the Twins played a good Guardians team early. The Twins played the Tigers team that started out the season well. You played the Dodgers. You played the Orioles on the road. There's some series where you had to take your lumps, and obviously you like to do better in those series. It doesn't excuse how you did, because part of the reason why they look good is because they did so well against you. But at the same time, you take your lumps early in the season. You have a soft stretch in your schedule. You take advantage of it. And now if you're the Twins, you're back in this thing. And if you look at the American League Central standings, and I know that it's still early and you don't want to standings watch completely, but, and now I see I have my banner in the way of this, but if you look at the AL Central standings, and if you ignore the White Sox being as bad as the White Sox are, the Twins are 4.5 games back. They've eaten 3.5 games out of Cleveland's lead. A week ago at this time, they're 8 games back of the AL Central top spot. You're 4.5 by May. You're fine. You are just fine if you're the Minnesota Twins, if you're sitting in that spot. The Guardians lost 2 out of 3 against the Braves this weekend. The Guardians are a good team. They're not scary. I'm not scared of the Cleveland Guardians. The Royals, the Tigers, look, they've been bad the last few years. I'm going to need to see it before I'm ready to crown them. The Guardians have at least won the AL Central in the last couple of years, so they've proven they can do it. But you at least got to give them that benefit of the doubt. But am I in fear of the Detroit Tigers? You saw them at Target Field. Twins should have won 2 out of 3 games. You saw we've seen the Kansas City Royals. We've seen and it's not to say that you shouldn't just laugh them off, but it's to say that you shouldn't be scared of any of these teams. The Twins are the defending division champions. That's the other thing about this. But overall, the Twins got themselves in a good spot. They have a chance to pick up a few more wins. I mean, at most, at very least, get a couple more. But even though the Twins go 1-3 or 1-2 in their 3-game series against the White Sox, that's still an 8-2 10-game stretch. And you'll take that 10 times out of 10 in baseball. We'll take that 10 times out of 10. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, some things with your schedule get a little wonky. You got to play some good teams. The Yankees are coming to town eventually. But it's a good spot for the Twins to be in. They've dug themselves out. They're not quite out of there yet. They're just a game above 500. But again, I think if you showed somebody the picture of the Twins having a 14-13 record on April 28th, and you showed somebody that a month ago on opening day, obviously, you're not going to be jumping for joy on that. But as a baseball fan, you go, okay, I'll take that. My team is in the race. They're above 500. They haven't dug themselves a hole. And now you wait. And you just kind of hope that things even themselves out. Again, the Twins played horrible a few weeks ago, up until a week ago. And that 7-game winning streak is random. It's fluky. You can't bank on those all the time. But it does kind of smoothen out some of those bad luck things. And keep in mind, the Twins are winning these games without Carlos Correa. They're doing it without Correa Duran. Duran is coming back. You're going to get him to help you out sometime this week, likely. You're going to get Correa likely sometime this week. And if you can do that, you're going to put yourselves in a good spot. Carlos Correa was hitting the baseball before he got hurt. He was feeling really good. Now we'll see. It's a rib injury, somewhere in the chest. I don't quite know. The medical term is escaping me. But, there is a chance that he's a little sore and it takes him a little bit to kind of get healthy again. But at the same time, Carlos Correa's glove being at shortstop is important. I know Willie Castro has done a okay job at holding down the fort, but the floor of the play at one of the most premier positions on the diamond in shortstop with Carlos Correa is so much higher. And then you have Vasquez Jeffers, who have done a nice job behind the plate. Then you have Carlos Correa back, Byron Buxton in center field. And that up the middle defense is back to where the Twins hoped it would be in the winter, being one of the best in baseball at those premier defensive positions. And you get Carlos Correa back, that's just going to help things out. And you're able to win 7 games. And again, it's against bad teams, but you didn't have some of your best players in Carlos Correa. And to come back and to do that, it's obviously very important for what this team wants to do and where they want to go and whatnot. So here's the deal. The Twins have that, and then now I'm going to go over kind of just some news and notes over the last week. Obviously, Louis Varland got sent down. I'm not surprised that they pulled him this early. I think when he had that really bad start a week ago against the Tigers, and he just could barely get out of the first inning, and it looked like he was so scared of getting a ball taken 400 feet to the bleacher seats at Target Field that he needed to nibble. And there's a difference. Nibbling when you're confident, you're hitting spots, you're doing what you need to do, but he wasn't nibbling because he was confident. He was nibbling for the exact opposite reason, because he was afraid of getting a pitch torpedoed to the bleachers. That's not ideal. He walked a bunch of guys, and Louis Varland is not a high walk pitcher. It's why his home runs are such a problem, is because he throws to the strike zone a lot. And when you can't get a lot of swings and misses, you have that ball go out. And the thing about Louis Varland, and I wrote a piece on this for Zone Coverage, talks about how Louis Varland, everybody thought he was the big winner when the Minnesota Twins did not get a bunch of starting pitching depth. Everybody thought, oh, great, means Louis Varland gets that 5th starting spot. And a lot of fans, myself included, wanted Louis Varland to be the 5th starter coming out of opening day. But last year, when Ober and Varland had to start the year in AAA, obviously they don't like it. They'd like to be with the major league club. And if I want to say it forced them to earn it, but they both got up because of injuries. But it just gave you that shield of depth. And DeSclafani, of course, we all know he's not going to pitch for the Twins ever, but you didn't have that wall. And Simeon Woods Richardson has come in and did a nice job, and he's tried to bounce back after a really bad year last year, and he's looked fine. As a number 5 starter, Simeon Woods Richardson has been fine. And if he can kind of grow with the position a little bit, he can hold down that fort. But there wasn't a lot of assured confidence, which made me think there was a possibility that the Twins just leave Louis Varland out there to kind of figure it out on his own and just keep getting shelled. And like they have no other choice but to run him back out there. There is David Festa in AAA. David Festa will be a big leaguer at some point this season, probably, but it's not going to happen probably till the All-Star break. You got to let him pitch in AAA before you call him up to the majors. And Simeon Woods Richardson was just an unknown, and he didn't quite have the start to AAA he wanted to, but he's pitched well in the couple major league starts he's had, which has made the Twins have to roll with him. But they went to Simeon Woods Richardson because they really had no other choice. Varland was just pitching so bad, and everybody thought Varland was that big winner that the Twins didn't acquire pitching depth, but in the end, he was the big loser because, in an ideal world, the Twins get, I know Blake Snell, Michael Lorenzen, take your pick on all those free agent pitchers who signed Jordan Montgomery, some of those pitchers. I get that they're all not lighting it up. So this is just for the sake of the argument. You have a guy in there who at least can force Varland to pitch well in AAA and kind of earn it. And not that Varland took it for granted or that he, was overconfident, but it's just that sense of competition breeds better players. You see with the catching position all the time for the Twins. Saw last year with the pitching staff. It was so competitive to get in there. You needed to be on time, you needed to be on your game every time you got onto the mound, or there was a chance that you weren't going to be pitching. And that's the thing with the Twins that they just don't have this year. So if Simeon Woods Richardson blows up, where are they going to turn to? Are they going to call Louis Varland back up again? You're not going to. Louis Varland's going to be down in St. Paul for a month at least. He's going to make about 4 or 5 starts before the Twins call him back up, barring an injury, knocking profusely on wood with that one. But they're kind of stuck in that spot. So Louis Varland is the loser because is the loser in this case. Loser is maybe too strong of a word, but you get my point. When there's a winner and a loser, everybody thought he was the winner. He was a loser because the Twins brought him out and he wasn't quite sharp. He wasn't quite ready. And he had to probably go out a few more starts longer than you wanted him to because he just kept getting shelled. And they really didn't have a great go-to answer. Simeon Woods Richardson may prove us wrong, and then we'll be okay. But Varland I just thought the Twins were going to give Varland a few more starts, but he was just so non-competitive, and that stinks. And that doesn't mean that he won't be productive again. I know there's a lot of people clamoring for him to go to the bullpen. It makes no sense with the Twins. We talk about they don't have a lot of starting pitching depth. Their bullpen is already rock solid. Keep Louis Varland in the rotation because the reason you want him in the bullpen is for the playoffs anyways, if you get there. And you can't get to the playoffs if you're down an extra starter. And your bullpen can be really strong, but as we've learned, even when the Twins have strong bullpens, if your starters only go 3 innings, you're going to wear them down. So it doesn't really matter in that long run. I'd like to see Louis Varland keep trying to be a starter. I think he's got some interesting stuff. His cutter has been getting hit a ton. That was the problem. And really, when you're a 2-pitch starter, you just throw those 2 pitches so often that hitters will make the adjustment. Good starting pitchers have 3+ pitches that are competitive in a major league at bat. And that's why they're starters. They throw so many different pitches that you as a hitter have to account for each of them. Bullpen guys only throw 2 pitches, really, a fastball and a slider if you're a Twins reliever. You don't throw anything else because you're only going to face a hitter once. You're not worried about, I don't want to throw the slider in this at-bat because the next time they come up, he's going to know and he's going to have timed it up. And that's not necessarily the case with a reliever. It's why typically major league relievers are 2-pitch pitchers, or really in some cases, they're just 1 pitch with the fastball. But I digress. The thing with Louis Varland is it stinks. He's obviously, as a former Bemidji State alum, he's a Concordia St. Paul Golden Bear. We're NSIC. You want to stick up for each other in that sense. But, he's just got to work on some things. He's got to cook in St. Paul for a little bit. It's fine. If he comes back and pitches well in July, I don't think anybody will care a ton that his start was bad. It's just not the ideal way to go, and the Twins kind of put themselves in a box there with that one. But anyway, going over some of the other headlines and kind of news and notes and things I've picked out over the weekend. And I'm going to wrap this up quickly because the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to tip off in about 15 minutes. So I'm not going to be too much longer here. But the Twins, I think the Twins broadcasts this year have been stellar. I know in the opening day podcast, I talked about the excitement of Provis being in the TV booth. Him and Morneau have a good rapport. And I think Provis over the weekend he was in the booth. It was a 3-man booth in the TV for Bally Sports with LaTroy Hawkins, former Twins reliever, and Trevor Plouffe, and of John Boy fame, of course. And they're really great. They are great. And this is the part I love. And Morneau's awesome. So this is not a detractor of Morneau. What makes Plouffe and LaTroy Hawkins really good is that one is a pitcher and one is a hitter. And they go back and forth, asking each other questions. And you can see both of them are excited to ask each other those questions. Provis doesn't have to poke and prod. There's a couple situations where LaTroy was asking Plouffe, hey, as a hitter, what are you seeing in that situation? Do you change how you're doing this? What would you do? He's actually picking his brain. He's not asking it to patronize. He's not asking because he feels like he has to. Provis isn't poking both of them to answer a question. They're talking about the game of baseball, which is what makes it so good. I learned a lot about baseball by watching that broadcast. I learned a lot about the way Trevor Plouffe talks about Ryan Jeffers' thighs, I guess. Learned a lot about the rally salami, but the summer sausage. There's a lot of things you learn, but I think Trevor Plouffe and LaTroy Hawkins did a really, really good job in the TV booth. I think Morneau does a really good job. But I think when you have some of those extra guys in there and you can kind of pick their brains and get them going about X or Y, I think a 3-man booth has been really good. I get why you don't want to do it all the time because it can get a little stale. But when the Twins have a 3-man booth, and Plouffe has been a part of those, they're really, really good. When Plouffe was with Morneau, those guys are former teammates. They can tell stories with each other. They can talk about things. Last year, that series in Oakland with those guys in the TV booth, they were excellent. So Trevor Plouffe is just really good on media. He's calm. You can just tell all those guys are smart. LaTroy, Morneau, everybody. But that booth is awesome. And with the Twins radio side, Dan Gladden, good. You got no complaints about him. But also they've rotated in Glenn Perkins, who was over the weekend with the Twins radio with Atterbury. Perkins has been good in the TV booth as well. And he does some stuff in the radio. He's been great. Paul Molitor is awesome on the radio. Him and Chris Atterbury are really, really good. And Molitor would be good in the TV booth too. But Molitor he was a Hall of Famer because he got 3,000 hits. But how do you get 3,000 hits? Well, because he has a good eye at the plate, because he knows how to read a pitcher. Because he does all this. His mind is thinking about baseball all of the time. And I think Atterbury and Provis are just really good about how do I engage and how do you get the most out of them. And, they know a lot about the game, but they might not know the best way to, or what's the right on-ramp to start this conversation. And that's what Provis is there for. That's what Adberry's there for. In my 9 to 5 job, I do play-by-play for high school baseball and softball. And it's fun because you can see how they're doing it. And, not like as one little league hitter to another. That's not what I'm trying to say. Those guys are pros. They're on a much higher level than I am. But the appreciation for what they're doing is great. It's really, really great. They are good. It's a good TV booth in there. It's a good TV booth, good radio booth. They're all excellent. The Twins have done a really good job with former players coming on as analysts. And Burt Blyleven was great, obviously, for nostalgia reasons. Tom Kelly being in the booth. Roy Smalley still does a good job when he's in there. There was Jack Morris. I know Torrey Hunter did some time. Speaking of which, Torrey Hunter, Angels coach, and he might need to go play outfield with how bad the Angels defense is. Joe Adell, I think, can be a nice hitter in baseball, but my goodness, he made plays that would have, I call high school baseball, softball games. The baseballs that Joe Adell let drop in the outfield, in right field, would get you benched in high school baseball. Like, it's so bad. He made Mike Trout stop going into a fly ball because he almost was going to run into him, and Mike Trout was worried about the collision, so he stopped, and a ball landed in between them. Adele let 4 baseballs get past him. The Angels are a young team, but they are sloppy. They are not great. And Ron Washington's a good manager. I got, nostalgia reasons. I remember him with Texas. He'll, I don't know if he'll turn things around. He might just be there to babysit a rebuild, like Ron Gardenhire was with the Tigers a few years ago. Might just be like you want a veteran manager in there with some young guys. And eventually we're going to have a guy come in where we're ready to compete. But we're not quite at that level yet, kind of a deal. But anyway, Torrey Hunter was in the dugout. He's a part of the coaching staff, I think, for Ron Washington. But man, you feel bad for Mike Trout, who's the second best player in baseball and the best player in the American League. You feel bad for Ron Washington having to be on this dumpster fire. You feel bad for Torrey Hunter having to be involved in that. Angels, man, they're bad. They can't pitch. They got they do a good job developing hitting. And they hit well over the series, but they can't pitch. And that was their problem with Ohtani and Trout there. And I know Ohtani was a starter, but outside of Ohtani, they had nobody. The Angels did such a horrible job of not just acquiring pitching, but developing pitching. It's that part of it. And it's why Derek Falvey's foibles, about, guys they hit and philosophies and whatever, and have the Twins developed this Cleveland-esque pitching pipeline? No, they haven't. But my goodness, the Twins can at least develop a little bit of pitching, right? I think we all can agree that the Twins pitching development and where the Twins are at getting pitchers ready to be major leaguers 10 years ago to now, 15 years ago to now, even when the Twins were good, they couldn't develop guys into being consistently good big league pitchers. Falvey can. And I'm not saying he's a great GM. I'm not saying all criticism of him is invalid. That's not the point. What I am saying is we got to be a little bit of appreciative because the Twins could be like the Angels if they don't have any pitching development like they've had, where they just get smacked around time and time again. Angels are bad. So Twins broadcasts have been good. The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim should probably contract the franchise or maybe let the Disney Corporation own them again. I don't know. Anyway, that's it. That's a podcast. Thank you all for joining me. This has been awesome. And until next time, this has been Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. Stick around for just on my Twitter feed and on Facebook. Follow Locked On Minnesota. They do a lot of Twins post-game streams. I'm going to be on the next couple for the next 2 games. I'm going to be on their post-game reaction streams. Come and join me on there as well, because that's been a lot of fun getting that opportunity, and I appreciate Locked On Minnesota for giving me that opportunity. So keep it coming. See you guys next time. Let's go Twins.